This is the Ben Shapiro Show. This show is sponsored by ExpressVPN. It's time to stand up to big tech. Protect your data at expressvpn.com/Ben. So, you remember this whole scandal with The Bachelor? We have been kept up to date on this with alacrity and intensity and specificity by both producers Savvy and Jessica. They have kept us up to date on this day to day. I will admit, I was never a fan of The Bachelor. I really didn't know much about it. But I've been brought into this controversy by my producers, and I'm happy to be here because this is the dumbest controversy of all time. To recap, for those who missed the story, originally, this season, The Bachelor featured the first black bachelor. That black bachelor was dating a white woman. Her name was Rachel Kirkconnell. Then it came out that Rachel Kirkconnell 3 years ago went to an antebellum party, which was supposed to just be people dressed up in like 1840s Southern outfits. This was deemed retroactively terrible and racist and horrible because how could you have an antebellum party at a plantation without acknowledging the evils of slavery? I mean, how could you do that? I mean, sure, every society prior to about 1750 had slavery within it, but this party did not, the party was not about the evils of slavery, therefore it was racist. And Rachel Kirkconnell personally was a racist for having gone to the party. Okay, but the first black bachelor, he said, no, maybe you should like give her the benefit of the doubt, stop digging up her parents' voting records, leave her alone a little bit, we don't need the woke mob descending. Then Chris Harrison, the host of the program, just repeated that. And he just said, yeah, what that guy said. And then the woke mob came for Chris Harrison. How dare he say she should be given grace? Terrible, terrible Chris Harrison. Very bad man. He is a racist because he had the temerity to say this to Rachel Lindsay, who's a former black bachelorette and apparently one of the high priestesses of woke. Rachel Lindsay, who took down her Instagram page because presumably she was at least somewhat embarrassed by having posted in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement last summer an ad for Cadillac in which she said that she fought for Black lives by listening to podcasts on her Bose sound system in her Cadillac XT6. So Chris Harrison apologized, but that wasn't enough. Because here's the thing. You apologize to the woke mob, that's just a sign that you should be brought to the guillotine. So they brought Chris Harrison to the guillotine. They axed him from the last several episodes of the show. And now the final episode of the show is going to be a live struggle session with Chris Harrison. It's really exciting. They're going to put him on the hot seat and ask him what he has learned about racism. And he's going to duly explain that he has learned so many things about racism, so many things, like anything can be racist. And if I apologize, can I please have my dating show that I'm executive producer of back? That's what he's going to learn about racism. It's very exciting stuff. Well, it is not a shock to learn today that The Bachelor has now the lowest ratings of the season and the second lowest of all time. According to Showbiz 411, The Bachelor fell to its lowest rating of the season and second lowest of all time Monday night with The Women Tell All. This is the 12th year of The Bachelor and the 25th season. It's been an utter disaster on the part of the show with a racism scandal that has sunk the whole enterprise. Matt James is the first black bachelor. There's nothing wrong with him. Wrong. He is a jerk. But his apathetic approach to the contestants was followed by his choosing of a white woman who turned out to have a racist past. Then, host Chris Harrison was interviewed by former bachelorette Rachel Lindsay, and the results were explosive. Harrison has now been replaced for the final show. Now, the final show will be live and hosted by a former NFL player who is black and who will presumably walk us through all of the anti-racist precepts of the modern world. Monday night's episode scored just 4.69 million viewers and dropped in the key demo as well. That means that they lost almost 1 million viewers from the previous week. And so people are thinking that Chris Harrison, his cancellation is final and he will go away. See, here's the thing. It's too late. It's too late for Chris Harrison. It's too late for The Bachelor. It's over, gang. The reason it is over is because he apologized. If he had just said nope, the ratings would be exactly the same as they were last week. But he did not say nope. Instead, he collapsed to this. So even if he comes back, he's going to have endless articles in the media about how terrible The Bachelor is for having allowed Chris Harrison, the original host of the program and an executive producer, to appear on air again without scourging himself publicly. And if he doesn't come back, it'll be a different host, and people aren't going to like the show as much because they're going to remember the reason that Chris Harrison was dumped is for no reason at all. Remember, his great sin was saying we ought to have grace for a human. That was his great sin. Not that he said the N-word, not that he said anything about the supposed inferiority of black people or anything racist like that. Nope. He didn't say any of that stuff. He said maybe we should have grace for a woman who went to a college antebellum-themed party and wore a pretty dress. Maybe we should have grace for her. Repeating, by the way, originally, the words of the first black bachelor, who was dating the lady at the time. That cowardly sack of poop. Okay, so Chris Harrison is not. Once you're in the Maoist struggle session, man, you just got to keep repenting. But repentance is never gained. Right? Just keep apologizing. So what is Chris Harrison doing now? According to page6.com, Chris Harrison isn't going down without a fight. Well, actually, he's going, literally, that is what he's doing. He's going down without a fight. Because if he had fought this, he'd be fine. But he didn't fight this, and so he's going down. The embattled Bachelor host appeared on Good Morning America to say his leave from the show doesn't necessarily mean a permanent exit. I plan to be back and I want to be back, he said. This interview isn't the finish line. There's much more work to be done. Oh, so much more work. He's doing the work. That's the phrase that we hear these days. Doing the work. And what does the work mean? The work means that you read an Ibram X. Kendi book and now you're not a racist anymore, or you might still be a racist. But you read the book. And that means you acknowledge your own racism, which means that you are a racist, but also you are anti-racist. And that means that you, at least for the moment, have won a temporary respite. He ain't going to get a temporary respite. Once you show your neck to the aggressors, they stomp on it. That is how this works. There has not yet been a human who has apologized for this stuff, who has then been ushered back into the graces of society. Last month, Harrison stepped away from his duties following a controversial interview where he said that he spoke in a manner that perpetuates racism. That is a lie. He did not speak in a manner that perpetuates racism. Rachel Lindsay is a race baiter. That is the end of the story. You can listen to the interview. He was not perpetuating racism in any way, shape, or form. That is an absurd contention. He told Michael Strahan on GMA, I'm an imperfect man. I made a mistake. I own that. He didn't make a mistake. You shouldn't own it. I believe that mistake doesn't reflect who I am or what I stand for. Too late. Once you made the mistake, one thing we know in American society, once you make the mistake, it does reflect who you are because you have now admitted that you made the mistake, which means that it was in your heart. I am committed to the progress, not just for myself, but also for the franchise. Committed to the progress. Why would anybody not want to watch this show now that it's going to be devoted full-time to woke Maoist struggle sessions? Sounds great. Because I'm sure when people tune into a dating show, what they actually want to see is Ta-Nehisi Coates on MSNBC. That's why they tuned into a dating show. ABC, which airs both The Bachelor and GMA, has not revealed whether Harrison's leave from the show will turn into something more. But he has been replaced by former NFL player Emmanuel Acko as host of the upcoming After the Rose special. On GMA, Harrison also blasted Old South themed parties, which he first defended. Antebellum parties are not okay. Past, present, future, knowing what that represents is unacceptable. Okay, then no one should ever be able to dress up as a Roman ever again because slavery was endemic in Rome. Nobody, for that matter, should ever be able to dress up as virtually any member of any culture before the year 1800 because slavery is endemic to a lot of those cultures, as it turns out. I mean, that's actually what they want, right? Eventually, you can only dress up as like letters of the alphabet or numbers, but not Arabic numerals. That's cultural appropriation. He then apologized again to Rachel Lindsay, who has demonstrated, by the way, no inclination toward allowing Chris Harrison any sort of repentance. And her inclination is to behead Chris Harrison in terms of career. Harrison made it clear he is not a victim. He is committed to making changes. I made a mistake. I own that. Racism, oppression, these are big dynamic problems. They take serious work. I am committed to that work. And here's the thing. He's been taking classes, guys. He's been taking classes with Dr. Eric Dyson. Dr. Eric Dyson. Oh, woke high priest Eric Dyson, who has taught him the idea of counsel, not cancel. As a result, Harrison said he's taken full accountability for his actions. So, yeah, that's just fantastic. Just fantastic. Maoist struggle sessions. I'm sure that'll make The Bachelor better. I definitely would like to watch The Bachelor once it becomes just a series of racial confessions by the non-racist host. This fun, stupid dating show with a perverse premise. So, what else is the left ruining today? Well, we'll tell you that in 1 second. First, when you are running a business, HR issues can absolutely kill you. Wrongful termination suits, minimum wage requirements, labor regulations, and HR manager salaries aren't cheap. An average of $70,000 a year. Bambee, spelled B-A-M-B-E-E, was created specifically for small business. You can get a dedicated HR manager, craft HR policy, and maintain your compliance all for just $99 a month. With Bambee, you can change HR from your biggest liability to your biggest strength. Your dedicated HR manager is available by phone, email, or real-time chat. From onboarding to terminations, they customize your policies to fit your business and help you manage your employees day-to-day, all for just $99 a month. Month to month, no hidden fees. You can cancel anytime. You didn't start your business because you wanted to spend time on HR compliance. Let Bambee help get your free HR audit today. Go to Bambee.com/Ben right now. Schedule that free HR audit. That is Bambee.com/Ben, spelled B-A-M to the BEE.com/Ben. Bambee.com/Ben. Go check them out right now. You don't want HR to become your biggest headache, as opposed to just a thing that you need to get taken care of. Head on over to Bambee.com/Ben right now. Schedule that free HR audit. Get started and protect your business today. Okay. Other things that the left is in the business of ruining. So apparently, it is a great leap forward for mankind that the Atlanta Dream has now been sold by Kelly Loeffler. You'll remember that former Senator Loeffler was the owner of the Atlanta Dream. Now, that was a non-profitable enterprise. I've spoken with former Senator Loeffler about this. She bought it basically because she likes women's sports. And then her entire team decided that they were going to run on behalf of Raphael Warnock in those races. And this meant that she was no longer welcome in the WNBA. So she sold the team. And this has become just an example of how we need sports to become even more political, guys, even more political. According to the New York Times, the Atlanta Dream, the WNBA team whose players revolted against a co-owner, Kelly Loeffler, and campaigned against her in a Georgia Senate race she lost, are being sold to an ownership group led by 2 real estate executives and a former star player for the team. Larry Goddess-Diner, the chairman of the real estate equity firm Northland, Susan Hebert, the chief operating officer of that firm, and the former WNBA star Renee Montgomery are leading figures in the new ownership group. The team had been on the market for a long time. Talks to sell ramped up in recent months. The Dream had been in the spotlight over the past year after their players, most of whom are black, publicly denounced Loeffler a Republican for attacking BLM. The players' union called for Loeffler's ouster. Players across the league campaigned for Raphael Warnock, who is running for her Senate seat and now occupies that Senate seat. Their efforts included wearing Vote Warnock shirts before games. And of course, the new owners hailed the players' activism. Goddess-Diner said, I think the Dream has always been an Atlanta asset, but they really solidified their place in the city, in the community, and in history last year. It's why I said this team in this city in this time. The women of the Dream showed incredible character last year. They were brave in speaking out for what they believed in. Well, I mean, not that brave. Not one of them lost a paycheck. I mean, seriously, not one. So, where was they were getting plaudits in the media. I didn't see any one of them rejecting a check from the lady who signed the checks, who they disagreed with. They just kept cashing those checks. Commissioner Kathy Engelbert said over the summer the league would not force Loeffler to sell her stake, but also that her comments did not align with the league's progressive values. Yes, indeed, you do. It turns out that all sports must now be made not only woke, but mandatorily woke. So this is seen as a step forward toward progress. Because, cleansing and purges, that's progress, gang. That makes life better for everyone. Everybody's celebrating today. Well, the good news is that nobody watched the WNBA in the first place, so nobody's going to watch the WNBA in the second place. Speaking of which, if we are talking about, woke players and their brilliance and their ability to speak on really important issues, just a quick note. It is worth noting that the Chinese government has now declared that it is perfectly acceptable that homosexuality can be called a mental disorder, according to the New York Post. Right? That's a Chinese court that now rules that homosexuality can be called a mental disorder. We heard just a couple days ago, LeBron James will never be silenced. LeBron James will always speak his mind on political issues. I very much look forward to LeBron James sounding off on Chinese homophobia and bigotry. I very much look forward to him putting his money where his mouth is and undercutting his Chinese domestic market. The same guy who was willing to say America was systemically racist and evil toward black people while earning tens of millions of dollars to play basketball. I want to hear from that guy about Hong Kong losing its freedom and China declaring homosexuality to be a mental disorder. And he sounds like a guy who always speaks up on politics. He can't be silenced unless you sign a big enough paycheck to him from, China. Then he can. But other than that, the NBA, none of them can be silenced. Alrighty, coming up, we'll get to economics and the COVID relief bill and the Democratic plans to inflate the currency, which is what is coming next. First, attention, savvy investors. You looking for a predictable monthly cash flow? Is a 10% annualized immediate monthly payout good for starters? How about bonuses targeted to 21%? If you want the safety and security of a real estate investment, but without the hassles of being a landlord, you've probably heard of NRIA. NRIA is an industry-leading real estate development firm in its 15th year, developing strategically located, low-risk, high-demand neighborhoods based on supply-demand imbalance. They are a great fit for safety-oriented investors who want cash flow and diversification into carefully chosen real estate. Learn more about NRIA Real Estate Development Fund at nria.net or call 800-800-1414. That's 800-800-1414. An offer of securities is only made by the NRIA Private Placement Memorandum. Read it first. Past performance does not guarantee future results. NRIA is a real estate development firm. Learn more at nria.net. Alrighty, coming up, Democrats continue to push forward a giant stimulus bill that we actually don't really need very much. We'll get to that in a second. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So, the stimulus package has gotten just a little bit smaller, according to the Huffington Post. After putting stricter limits on who will receive another stimulus check last month, Democrats are once again changing their proposal to give most Americans suffering amid the coronavirus pandemic $1,400. By the way, you're still getting $400 a week in unemployment insurance federally. The proposed change would deny checks to higher earners who would have received only partial checks under the previous version of the legislation, which cut off payments to individuals earning more than $100,000 and couples above $200,000. The new cutoffs would be $80,000 for individuals and $160,000 for joint filers. Democrats intended the $1,400 checks to complement the $600 payments from the last pandemic relief bill Congress passed in December, since Joe Biden and Democratic Senate candidates in the Georgia runoff promised to deliver $2,000 checks. Individuals with incomes beneath $75,000, couples earning less than $150,000 would still receive the full $1,400 under the proposed change, but the lower income limit means some people who receive partial payments would not receive partial payments from the next one. So, first of all, a lot of people who still have jobs are getting checks, because 86% of Americans are about to get a check. So most Americans are still employed. Like, the unemployment rate in America right now is something like 10%. So that means that a huge number of people are still getting paid. A huge number of people are still working. And those people are getting stimulus checks from the government as the pandemic comes to a close. We don't actually need this giant stimulus package. Like, we don't need it. And yet the Democrats are pushing forward with it because it is important for them to take more government control. And the more you are used to receiving checks from the government, the more you like it. Human beings always like free stuff. And if the government just starts sending you checks, what in the world would stop them from continuing to send you checks? This is the problem with universal basic income. It never stays basic. It just remains universal. In any case, Joe Biden is very happy with Nancy Pelosi, who has continued to create bills that no one is compromising on. Biden just is, again, not a sentient human being. He is losing it. It is perfectly obvious he is losing it. It is not in any way ageist to point this out, because there are people who are young who lose it. Joe Biden is not young, and he is losing it. Here is Joe Biden losing it.
I've been here a long time, and there's been no speaker that's been your equal, although there's been some great speakers. And you just have a special way about you, Nancy. And you're also very, very, which is important, you're kind, but you're tough. And you know what's right, and you stick by it. And I admire the devil out of you.
Yeah, I just imagine, man. You know, I've been here for a long time. And I remember back in the olden days, there's no electricity, and we used candlelight to make corrupt deals and Neanderthals and... Yeah, so that guy seems like he's in charge, probably. By the way, isn't it bad for a country when everybody running the country is 1,000 years old? Like, it's just that's not a rip on people who are elderly. It is not. It is just a point, which is, at a certain point, shouldn't, people who are like the baby boomers grow up? These are not even baby boomers. Okay, Joe Biden is the generation before the baby boomers. And yet these are the people who are leading the country. Like, there's no one available under the age of 75 to lead the country. Like, no one at all. It holds in the Republican Party too, by the way. I mean, Donald Trump is well into his 70s. Mitch McConnell, I believe, is 7 years old. Like, there's no one of a younger generation who is capable of taking up a leadership position. I'm sorry, Mitch McConnell is 79. So I guess if nobody wants to grow up to be an adult, then the only adults in the room are going to be the people who are adults, 50 years ago. Really, really solid stuff right there. Okay, meanwhile, what I do love is hearing from Elizabeth Warren, who literally says that money has no meaning. So Elizabeth Warren is a devotee of modern monetary theory. That is, you shouldn't care about the national debt ever. You should just continue to spend until the end of time, continuously. Because after all, spending is based on the full faith and credit of the United States. We have a strong economy. We can keep spending and nobody's ever going to say boo. But here she is ripping on Bitcoin. Okay, now the reason Democrats want to rip on Bitcoin is because if people actually start using Bitcoin instead of the US dollar, it means that it is very difficult to sell American debt. Because why in the world would you buy American debt when you can just invest in an asset that does not depreciate over time the way that fiat currencies like the US dollar do? Members of the government are really opposed to Bitcoin. I've become kind of a fan of Bitcoin, to be honest with you. Here's Elizabeth Warren saying Bitcoin will end. So Bitcoin is going to end badly. But the US dollar, which we are going to inflate over the course of the next 10 years at an insane rate, that is not going to end badly. Bitcoin, which is a currency that is based in a limited supply, right, that cannot be inflated, that is going to end badly. But an inflatable currency that you can move up and you can move down, do whatever you want with it, that's totally fine. Here's Elizabeth Warren making a nonsensical economic case.
There are people like Janet Yellen who are warning that this is both speculative in nature and is going to potentially end badly. Do you have a view?
Yeah, I think that Janet's a really smart woman.
That's all you're going to say about Bitcoin.
Well, speculative in nature and going to end badly. I don't think Janet left a lot of room for ambiguity there.
I mean, if you want to talk about speculative in nature, then you might want to think about, the U.S. dollar that you are currently inflating at an extraordinary rate because you're blowing out the spending with no underlying economic growth to back that sort of blowout in spending, right? It's pretty impressive stuff. You mean members of the government don't like currencies that are alternative that people can invest in? Who could have predicted such a thing? Alrighty, coming up, we're going to be joined by Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. Joining us on the line is Governor Kristi Noem, lifelong farmer and rancher, 33rd governor of South Dakota, first female governor. Governor Noem, thanks so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Ben. Thanks for inviting me on.
So let's talk a little bit about your COVID strategy in South Dakota, which, of course, has been highly controversial. According to the media, every death is on your hands. Everything that has happened in South Dakota is your fault. The economic record in South Dakota continues to be sterling, however. So how did you make the strategy for South Dakota, and what did that strategy actually look like?
I think, Ben, I did what every other governor in this country did. I looked at the science behind the virus and the data, and then I looked at the facts on the ground of what we were dealing with here in our state. But I maybe then at that point took it a step further. I talked to my general counsel. I consulted with constitutional attorneys. I really wanted to understand what my job was as a governor, what authority I had, and then also what authority I did not have, and stay within those bounds. I've just been a firm believer that when you have a leader overstep their authority in a time of crisis, that's really when you break this country. So, we made decisions to trust people. I told my folks here in South Dakota that I would give them all the information that I have. I'd be palms up with them, and that I was going to let them use personal responsibility to make the best decisions for them and their families. So I think people overwhelmingly did that, and it worked well for them. They were able to keep their businesses open, take some public health measures, but also feed their families and take care of their employees and get through this pandemic in a better way than many other states.
Well, it's been fascinating to watch as the media reduce the COVID policy calculation down to one factor and one factor only, and that is the death per million ratio, when in reality, obviously, there are a lot of other factors at play. Things like how many people lose their livelihoods, how many people lose their small businesses, how many kids can go to school, what level of freedom you're willing to give up in order to achieve a better ratio, and also whether any of those policies are even effective. When people talk about, the way that the pandemic played out in South Dakota, they seem to ignore the fact that South Dakota is not number one in the nation in terms of death per million. In fact, South Dakota is not in the top 5 in the nation, but New Jersey and New York are both 1 and 2.
Yeah, it's interesting because they point consistently to me being reckless or irresponsible, yet my numbers are better than many other states that had all kinds of mandates, that shut down businesses, that made people stay home, that mandated masks. And we did not do those things. And I would say that we can't find consistency in those mitigation measures. I think that what happened here in South Dakota is that we allowed them to exercise their personal freedom, gave them all the information they needed to protect their health, but economically, our state's doing good. Our discussion during legislative session right now is how are we going to spend all of the extra revenue this year that we didn't anticipate having? And that's because we had record sales tax numbers come in. I think everybody who wanted a little bit of freedom this year took their vacations in South Dakota. We're moving businesses here in overwhelming numbers. We've got families that are moving in because they can have their kids in school. They can have some personal choices still left to them that the government isn't making for them. So it's been remarkable to really see the impact a small state like South Dakota can have on people and their belief systems.
Well, the outsized hatred of the media is good proof that you're doing some things right. South Dakota currently does have the lowest unemployment rate of any state in the country, according to the BLS, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. December 2020, you have a 3.3% unemployment rate, as opposed to, say, New York, which has an 8.7% unemployment rate, or California, which has a 9.3% unemployment rate. So, Governor Noem, how have you dealt with the disparate treatment of your governorship as opposed to the governorship of people like Andrew Cuomo in New York or Gavin Newsom in California, who have had some pretty egregious suffering in their state and have decided to lock everybody down, apparently, until the end of time?
It's been interesting because people talk a lot about my national profile or why people know who I am today. Because really, a year ago, nobody really knew who Kristi Noem was or even paid attention to our state. And I tell them all the time, the only reason that you've heard my name now is because the liberals came after me. They started attacking me for all the decisions that I was making. Elizabeth Warren went on national TV and ripped me apart and called me irresponsible. And Rachel Maddow came after me repeatedly on her show over and over again. So it has been interesting to watch them hold up governors such as Cuomo as the example and their hero in dealing with the virus. And now we really find out what he did that was so horrible in his state, and to see the duplicity and how the media treats people. Listen, I've never before realized, I don't think until 2020, how the media will use fear to control people. And that was shocking to me, how far they would go. And it educated me a lot as to their tactics. And I think it's going to take some of us states standing up and pushing back on their lies and their agenda that they're pushing, and even the Democrats and the liberals on how they're trying to change this country through this virus.
And Governor Noem, being the leader of a state, and we spoke with Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida yesterday, it seems like for conservatives, for a lot of moderate Americans, it seems like the hope for freedom lies in the states, not in the federal government. What we're watching right now on a broad variety of levels is states that are having to step in and protect the freedom of their citizens from a predatory national government that seems to want to control everything. We see this in everything from the social sphere down to the economic sphere. And one of the things that you've been doing in your state is seeking to protect the unborn, particularly the unborn who have Down syndrome, because what we have seen is a sort of eugenic approach to abortion in which a lot of folks across the country have decided that not only is it okay, it's laudable for women to abort children with Down syndrome, which effectively is eugenics. You've been pushing a different policy in South Dakota.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a bill that just passed through the legislature here this week that I will be signing into law that will prevent a doctor from performing an abortion on a baby upon a diagnosis of Down syndrome. So we will not be targeting babies in South Dakota just because they have an extra chromosome. There is a diagnostic test that's available to women at 10 weeks and another one at 15 weeks that would tell them if their baby is Down syndrome or not. And what we're doing here is protecting that baby to make sure that it is not eliminated, killed, or aborted because of that diagnosis. So I think it's incredible that we send a message that every life is special, every life is cherished, that eugenics is not something that will be accepted here in our state, and that hopefully we can carry that message to other states as well, that the science is on our side, that we understand more and more every single day about what happens in the womb and that person that needs to be protected through life and through birth. And we will continue to do that and change the narrative that's going on in this country.
So, Governor Noem, speaking of the way the federal government has been getting involved in so many of these issues, I know that the Democrats are pushing forward this $1.9 trillion COVID relief program. It includes $350 billion that are directed toward cities and states and bailing out particularly areas of the country that have had endemically bad governance. We now have information suggesting that states like California didn't actually lose tax revenue last year. California actually ended up basically where it was in tax revenue because of the original stimulus bills that were passed by and signed into law by President Trump and the Republican Party. It doesn't matter. They're pushing forward this sort of redistributionist plan. How does a state like South Dakota approach something like that?
It's frustrating because I feel as though we did the best we could to protect people's health as well as the economy and their jobs. We were the state that lost the least amount of businesses because of this virus. We lost the least amount of employee hours, least amount of employee wages. We really were a testimony to our conservative principles and protection of freedoms really does work. It opens up opportunities for folks. And now we have the federal government coming out and rewarding those bad actors that made all the wrong decisions. So it's incredibly frustrating. I've told the federal government for months now, even back into 2020, don't send us any more money. Just give us flexibility in what you've already given us and let us use it in the best way to make sure that we're doing things correctly to set people up for success a decade, 2 decades into the future. That's why people will see me not just focusing on bailing out or increasing unemployment benefits, things like that, but it's investing in workforce training, getting people into better jobs, making sure that we're getting high-speed internet access to every home in the entire state of South Dakota. That's the kind of investments that we should be making rather than bailing out bad states that close down their economies and now we're going to get rewarded for it.
So Governor Noem, you spoke at the Conservative Political Action Conference last week, obviously one of the big ballyhood speeches at the convention. Many people in the media have basically declared that the Republican Party is in a state of complete fracture because of President Trump and because he is such a polarizing figure for a lot of folks. I'm not really seeing the fracture, to be completely honest with you. It feels as though many of the people who love President Trump and love him for a variety of reasons really are unified by one significant fear, and that is a unified left that is seeking to change all of the fundamentals about the country. And many people on the right see Trump as sort of an avatar of the resistance to that, as the guy who's caught a lot of slings and arrows for fighting that. But the broader mission, which is to fight an overwhelming left change in the country, that's not relegated to President Trump, and I think you made that clear in your speech.
I did. I talked about why America needs conservatives, and it's a belief system that this country was founded on, that we believe and that we want to protect, because it really is what has given us the opportunity to be successful and the most exceptional nation in the world for hundreds of years. The left has gotten extremely far out there. I tell people all the time that I knew I served with extremists when I was in Congress. What's changed the last couple of years is they're so proud of it. They're so boldly declaring their embracement of socialism and communist principles and values that is a dramatic shift that we've seen in the last few years. And that's why Republicans are united around the conservative message and will continue to defend our history, our leaders that led us through challenging times. They had flaws, but they also did incredible things for us and our children and grandchildren, and that we need to continue to talk about the value that applies to today's culture and our government as well. There's a very specific reason that our founders gave the federal government very limited powers. They wanted the vast majority of the power to remain with the states and with the people. And we're going to have to continue to educate folks on why that is important and then show to them that it really does work and create a better situation for their families. That's what we did here in South Dakota. We've talked for years in this state about our conservative values. We put them into place this year, and we're showing that it really does work and it really is the best path to success.
Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, really appreciate your time and your leadership. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you, Ben. You have a wonderful day.
All righty. Coming up, we're going to get into the latest from the CDC. They are apparently holding up again their standards with regard to vaccinations, which is not a surprise at all because, of course, they have to make sure that Joe Biden has cleared those particular policies. They have to make sure that they are restrictive enough. We'll get to that in just a moment. First, there's never been a more important time to protect your internet activity than right this moment. That's why I urge you to get ExpressVPN. Everything you search for, watch, click online can be tracked by big tech companies. They can then match your activity to your true identity using your device's unique IP address. When I switch on ExpressVPN with my computer or phone, my IP address is masked by a secure VPN server. That makes it harder for websites to identify me. The ExpressVPN app also encrypts my network data to protect my sensitive information from being compromised. Plus, you can use ExpressVPN on up to 5 devices simultaneously, so multiple users on your network can stay safe with a single subscription. What I like most is how easy it is to use. It takes just one click to protect all your devices. That's why they are rated the #1 VPN by CNET and Wired as well. So stop handing over your data to big tech companies. Go with the VPN I trust. For online protection, visit expressvpn.com/Ben to get 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/Ben to get 3 extra months for free. Head on over to expressvpn.com/Ben right now to learn more. Once more, that's expressvpn.com/Ben. Get 3 extra months free on a 1-year package. expressvpn.com/Ben right now. Alrighty, coming up, the CDC was supposed to release standards for what exactly you can do if you're vaccinated. And those standards should be pretty obvious. Namely, you can meet with as many vaccinated people as you want. And even if you're meeting with unvaccinated people, you really shouldn't worry all that much because these vaccines are extremely effective. Right? That should be the way that the CDC approaches this. However, the Biden administration has now intervened, and they are delaying the standard once again. Watch for the politics. Next week, when they release the CDC standard, watch for the restrictive nature of the language. Politico is now even acknowledging that the Biden team is deeply concerned that too many states reopening too early might actually be doing so in concert with some of the things that the CDC is saying. So watch for them to shift the scientific guidance. We'll get to that in just one moment. Plus, we'll get to continued anti-conservative behavior on college campuses. We have a new study coming out demonstrating just how many college professors are at risk of their livelihoods for being conservative. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Welcome back. This is the Ben Shapiro Show. So, you know what'd be super useful right now? How about like a set of CDC guidelines on what vaccinated people can do? Because we have a ton of people in this country who are vaccinated. Many states where a majority of seniors are vaccinated right now, including major states like California and Florida. So what can vaccinated people do and what can they not do? Now would be a great time for the CDC to say, unfortunately, the Biden administration has now said the CDC is not allowed to say because they're not going to like what the CDC says. What the CDC, what the actual scientific standards say is that vaccinated people should be able to be with vaccinated people just about anywhere. And that vaccinated people kind of should be able to be with non-vaccinated people because the vaccines are really, really effective. That is the purpose of the vaccine. Okay, so here is how Politico reports this. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will not be releasing its guidance for vaccinated Americans on Thursday as originally planned, according to two senior administration officials with knowledge of the situation. After a series of meetings and calls with senior officials on the White House's COVID-19 task force and the Department of Health and Human Services over the last 2 days, the CDC was told to hold off on releasing the recommendations. Oh, well, I have a few thoughts. One is that probably the administration didn't like the recommendations and now they're playing games with it. Remember that time they said that Trump was super bad because he kept interfering with the CDC? And it turned out he really wasn't. Biden, we know for a fact, interfered with CDC recommendations on schools. We know it for a fact because the original statement from Rochelle Walensky is that teachers did not have to be vaccinated to go back into the schools. Then there was this whole CDC standard that came out that said virtually all students should be in hybrid or not in school programs. And they said that they had taken advice from the teachers' unions, which, by the way, is not a scientific source. When you go to the hospital, you don't look for a teacher. You look for a doctor. In any case, Politico says the reason is unclear why this is being held up, but one senior administration official said the guidelines were still being finalized. Another official said the CDC had put together the guidelines over the last several weeks and was preparing to go through the final clearance process before the stop was put in place. A new draft of the guidelines was circulated Friday and then again early this week. So they keep putting forward all of these drafts, and Biden and company keep killing them. Top health officials were supposed to sign off on the language on Wednesday. A third senior administration official expected the guidelines would be released soon. A fourth said major guidelines on COVID-19 often go through rigorous deliberations in the last few days before their release. Jason McDonald, spokesman for the agency, said CDC's guidelines will not be posted tomorrow because we haven't finalized it. Once it's final, we'll publish it. And then, buried in paragraph 7, there's no evidence to suggest the Biden White House is trying to suppress the CDC guidelines or override the judgment of CDC scientists. Oh, is there no evidence of that? Then what's your alternative theory? Can we hear it? What is your evidence that the Biden administration has not done that in the past, when we know for a fact that, according to Walensky, the teachers' unions weighed in on the CDC guidelines on schools? My favorite part of this is that Politico's like, there's no evidence that Biden is interfering, but Trump did. This is how Politico reports it. There is no evidence to suggest the Biden White House is trying to suppress the CDC guidelines or override the judgment of CDC scientists, but officials inside the nation's health agencies are on edge after years of repeated political interference from the Trump administration, which notoriously cut the CDC out of critical policy conversations on COVID-19. And Trump appointees at HHS routinely interfered in the agency's morbidity and mortality weekly reports. The CDC's guidelines for vaccinated people, as described to Politico earlier this week, were supposed to say that those who had received a full course of vaccine could socialize with other vaccinated people in small groups in the home without masks. So first of all, that guideline makes no sense. Really, it doesn't make any sense. Why small groups of people in homes without masks? Why shouldn't vaccinated people be able to, go anywhere with other vaccinated people? What is the difference between 2 vaccinated people meeting up and 1,000 vaccinated people meeting up in a much larger space? Can they explain? Nope. How about 1,000 people meeting outdoors? Vaccinated. Nope, they can't explain that either. But the guidelines said vaccinated individuals should continue to adhere to mask and social distancing guidance in public. Why? I mean, really, can they explain why? I'm waiting on tenterhooks to hear why vaccinated individuals who have a 99% immunity to death from COVID and a 95% immunity from serious cases of COVID and a 90% inability to transfer the disease, why those people desperately need to wear masks in public. The guidelines were set to include various scenarios for immunized people to consider, including travel. CDC's guidelines were set to come out when the White House and Biden's COVID-19 task force is trying to push back against Texas and Mississippi. There it is. There it is. So what they're going to do is they're going to make the guidelines more strict because, after all, have to maintain control. Deeply, deeply important. Okay. Meanwhile, we now have a study demonstrating what you already knew, which is that colleges discriminate against conservatives in academia. We knew this. According to Alex Nestor, writing at freebeacon.com, 1 in 3 conservative academics has been threatened with disciplinary action for expressing their beliefs. 1 in 3. Research from the Center for the Study of Partnership and Ideology released Monday shows conservative professors and graduate students are guaranteed to face discrimination in academia. University of London politics professor Eric Kaufman conducted the study, which he says is the first to focus on how academic authoritarianism threatens conservatives on campus. Kaufman analyzed 8 surveys of graduate-level professors and doctoral students, the majority of whom said they would not oppose discriminating against right-leaning peers in some form. You are literally... The new ruling class does not allow conservatism. And in fact, it is considered de rigueur. It's considered good form to discriminate against conservatives. 10% of academics support outright canceling or firing conservative professors who express their views. And again, the majority of grad-level professors and doctoral students say they don't oppose discrimination against conservatives in some form. Even without punishment mechanisms, widespread opposition to conservative views leads to, quote, powerful conformist pressures that make people keep their mouths shut. 70% of conservative academics reported their department created a hostile environment for conservative ideas. 9 in 10 Trump-supporting academics reported they would not feel comfortable expressing their views to a colleague. More than half of conservative academics admitted to self-censoring their research and teaching. And, says Kaufman, it's likely to get worse. 20% of academics under 30 support dismissing peers deemed controversial, and 30% of doctoral students say they would discriminate against grant bids from right-leaning researchers or decline to promote a conservative peer. This sort of discrimination, I mean, we've all known about this for a long time. It's perfectly obvious. And, by the way, it does create a cadre of ever more left-leaning professors. Because if you can't find a dissertation advisor who is not going to cancel you, then you just write whatever leftist crap they want you to write, or you don't go into academia. And that is what is happening right now, which is why it is incumbent on conservative employers to stop looking at the college degree. We here at Daily Wire don't. Instead, we interview people. We look at their work experience. We don't look at a degree from Harvard as though it means you learned anything, because very frequently, it does not. It means you may have only learned the lingo of the new ruling class. Conservative business owners, stop looking at a college degree like it confers anything other than a certain baseline level of intelligence to get into the college in the first place. We all know that that's what college really is at this point. Treating these universities though they teach things, particularly in the soft sciences, is ridiculous. Alrighty, we'll be back here tomorrow with much, much more. In the meantime, head on over to dailywire.com/subscribe and use code DEBUNKED to get access to my brand new show. You get 25% off your subscription if you use that code DEBUNKED at dailywire.com. You're listening to The Ben Shapiro Show.